This is LibreQuest. My name is Matt. It is the 4th of November 2019, and I have an article today that is a historical article, and it is from CNN.com. It is Linux Faithful Still See OS on Desktop. Linux evangelists are keeping the faith even when it comes to the elusive holy grail of the open source operating system, taking a significant chunk of the desktop market. The news has not been good since this time last year. Companies seeking to make a profit from the desktop applications have closed or spun off their Linux operations, and big-name backer Dell canceled an offer for Linux-enabled desktop and laptop machines. That is so unfortunate. Why would you do that, Dell? All right, so this is an interesting article from 2001, and just wanted to share that one today. So what's the deal? I've been sick, and I haven't been doing any podcasts, and I had a whole bunch of stuff planned, like really cool stuff. And like today was like the first chance that I felt up to actually doing a podcast. And what I wanted to talk about today is not really anything to do with the usual stuff, like news and all that. I did want to share that one article, but what I want to talk about today is kind of special because it's how I got started using Linux, and that is just the a command line. And if you have ever used Unix, or if you've ever used DOS, or if you've ever used any kind of a command line driven operating system, and this stuff will probably be pretty familiar to you. So I'm going to go ahead and jump on into it. I don't know why there's a 3 there on the screen, but okay, so the number one most important thing, I'm sure you've probably heard RTFM. You've probably heard RTFM, but let's just make it RTM. So read the manual. That's really sound advice, and it's actually quite important. And it was like the very first thing that my kind brother taught me with Linux when I first got an in-person demonstration of Linux before I actually installed my first distribution, which was Mandrake 7.2. This was my introduction, and I was, of course, familiar with DOS, and I believe, in school, my first introduction to computing was the command line, because you had to use the command line in order to launch programs and stuff. It was just the basic way that you used a computer at that time for personal computing. And so to me, it was familiar enough, and so there's basic ways to navigate in the command line. Now, Linux City actually did a video where he talked about Arch Linux is not for beginners, and I saw the title. I was like, what's he talking about? Of course it's for beginners. And then as I listened to it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I hadn't even thought about that. He's so right. If your first introduction to computing wasn't on the command line, if it was like a GUI and stuff, and that's what you're used to, then Arch Linux, for somebody who's kind of their idea of personal computing is the command line. And like when I think Linux, I picture in my mind the command line. That's to me, that's Linux. And so but if that's not how you think of Linux, if that's not what pops into your mind when you think Linux or whatever, and it seems a little bit unfamiliar, then I can see Arch Linux not being that. But for someone who is, it's just like, well, Arch isn't a problem. Everything's already pre-built for you. You just gotta, partition and format and mount some volumes and install a pre-built system. So, and I had never taken a look at Arch until, I don't know, it's actually been just not too many days ago. I was like, I'd heard like Arch is difficult and hard and stuff, and I first thing I noticed when I booted up, there was actually installation instructions, and I'm like, well, I don't see how that can be hard to follow direction, and I'm not trying to be condescending. It's just that, that's how I think. I'm like, well, it's a command line, so I mean, but anyway, I'm going to move on. The most important thing with Linux is actually the manual, which is just MAN. And it says, if you type in man, it says, what manual page do you want? So there's a lot of options here for navigating your system. But I wanted to talk first about just getting some basic information about your system. For starters, you could say who. Well, it'll tell you who your username is. And then there's clear, which is very handy. It actually clears the screen for you. But most importantly, let's take a look at the CPU. So if you want to know what processor your system is using, you can do ls CPU, and that's going to bring up a whole bunch of information. Of course, my screen, I've got this quite zoomed in for purposes of recording, so it looks kind of weird, but you can see it's an Intel Pentium 840 at 2.8 gigahertz, and that's a 2-core. So it's a 2-core processor on the LSCPU. Now, I typed in LSCPU, but more importantly, let's read the manual for LSCPU. It says LSCPU display information about the CPU architecture. And if you use page down, you can just come through here and look at all your different options that you have that you can work with. Now, this is kind of important. I don't know anyone who actually uses every single program that comes with a Linux install. And I certainly don't. And if you want to look at how many binaries there are, you can actually go to the user binary directory, and that's going to be, to change directory, you just do cd, change directory. And actually, let's look at the manual for cd. So man space cd. There's no manual entry. Okay, that's great. So we'll do cd space -- help. Here we go. So this will give you some help. Now, if there's not a manual entry for the command, you can actually do -- help. And -- help is handy as well. But anyway, we're going to do change directory. We're going to go over to /usr/bin. So that's all the binaries that are on the system, all the programs. And if we list everything in here using the ls command, and actually let's look man space ls. And what this is it just lists the directory contents. And there's a whole bunch of options. You can do -A. And when you're in a manual page, if you just hit the letter Q, that'll take you back to your working directory, whatever directory you're in. So let's do ls-a, capital A. That's going to list almost all. Chris, you know what? It looks like it did list. It looks like everything to me. I don't know. Okay, maybe I typed it in wrong. Who knows? But anyway, all these, there's just so many programs that are located in this directory. And then you've also got your user local binary. So let's change directory, cd space /usr/local/bin. And let's take a look in here. So I've got enemy territory dedicated. I've got a link that I made for YouTube DL. I don't like typing in YouTube DL. I use YouTube DL, but that's too much to type for me. So I just take it to Y, just the letter Y by itself. And you can do that. Actually, YouTube DL, well, I'm not going to get into that. Anyway, let's get back to what I was talking about. Let's go back to the user bin directory. There are so many programs in here. It's just crazy. I mean, it's your system, so if you want to, you can go in here and just start executing stuff and see what it does. But if you don't want to do that, you can just look up the man page and read about it. What is znew? Let's take a look at that. Znew, it recompressed .z files to gz files. Okay, handy, probably, I don't know. So I'm going to change directory back to my home directory, which is going to be /home/Matt. So, okay, so we did, I'm going to clear the screen, type in clear. So we did LSCPU to look at the CPU. Now we can also do free, F-R-E-E, and that's going to tell us how much system RAM is being used. Now, if you want it to be human readable, so it's not in, what is this, in bytes, I guess? I'm not sure. That's sad, I don't know. But we'll do free -H, and it says that I've got 7.7 gigabytes, and I'm using 2.2 gigabytes of that RAM. So we know what the CPU is. We know how much RAM there is in the system. I'm going to go ahead and clear that screen, and let's look at the manual page for free. And in free, it says free, display amount of free and used memory in the system. And then it's got all of your options down here. -B displays in bytes, -K in kilobytes, and you've got mebi, gibi, peta, tera, giga, mega, kilo, all your different options of how you can display it. So you can display all those different options there. So I'm going to hit Q to exit that manual page. Alright, so we looked at the RAM, we looked at the CPU, now let's look at the disk space. So for disk space, you can either, if you want to look at an individual file, you can use DU. So I'm going to get a directory listing here by typing ls, and I'm in my home directory, so I want to check, let's see how big LibreQuest.png is. See how much disk space that's using. So I'm going to do du-h, and I think that's an option. Let's go man du, and I think -h is an option. Yeah, human readable. Okay, that's pretty common. So I'm going to hit Q, exit the manual, and I'm going to do du-h, and then I'm going to type in the name of that file, which is LibreQuest.png. Hit enter, and it says it takes up 456 kilobytes of the storage that's on this system. So that's the du command. That's very handy if you want to know how the size of a file, how much space it's actually, the disk usage. If we do man du, it says du is estimate the file space usage. Very handy, but we're going to use df to check the system storage, and we're going to do a -h to make that human readable. So if you're watching the video, you notice there's a whole bunch of snaps listed in here. I don't really want to see those, so I'm going to do df-h-x. I'm going to exclude everything but my my SDs, my storage devices, my SATA drives. I don't know what SD stands for. I really don't know much. I'm honestly, I'm more of an intermediate user. I mean, I'm a long-time user, but I don't know what every little thing means. And there's so much debate about what stuff means in Linux. It's crazy. You hear people say sudo is super user do or switch user do. su is super user or switch user. You hear gnome, you hear gnome. You hear data dump, you hear disk duplicator. I mean, I gotta tell you, it's confusing. But, you know, anyway, so, and devices used to be HDA, HDB, you know, when you were using IDE drives. But so when it went to SD, I was like, was it SATA? But, you know, I've got other stuff in here that's not SATA. So I have no idea. Very confusing. But anyway, I just want to see what's on my dev SDA drives. So, and that does include my floppy disk drive, which is mounted on SDC, which is 1.4 megabytes. So if you're watching the video and you see that, that's what that is. That's why I have a 1.4 megabyte drive. But I can see how much disk space is used and how much is available and the size of the actual drive. So I've got one here that's 110 gigabytes. I've used 56 gigabytes and I've got 49 gigabytes free. So that's so we've checked the CPU, we've checked the RAM, and we've checked the storage. So now let's look into what devices are running on the PCI bus. So we're going to look at LSPCI, and this just shows a whole big list of things, and it gives a location of where they're running on the bus. And so let's look at the manual for LSPCI. It says list all PCI devices, and it displays everything about the PCI buses in the system. And it's got a whole bunch of options, which I don't use. So let's do USB next. Let's see what's connected on USB. So I've got Logitech webcam. Let's see, Linux Foundation root hub. Okay. I've got a card reader, USB 3.0 and USB 2.0. Cool. So let's look at the manual for LSUSB. And LSUSB, under the name, says it lists USB devices. So that's pretty simple. And then it's got all of your options in here. So when you see somebody say RTFM, that's actually not too unreasonable of advice if they would drop the F, because that's not nice at all, really. And it's really not helpful to tell somebody that. But, you know, it is helpful to read the manuals for things. And it really does make things a lot easier, and it makes navigating your system and knowing how to use different programs a lot easier as well. Now, with that said, when I took a look at Arch, it did make me question why. Why? GUI installers are fantastic. Now, I didn't actually get into the system too much because I just got a rough idea of what it was about. I didn't really know. I heard people saying that it was a difficult system to use, and I wanted to take a look for myself and just really, see, is this a difficult system to use? Why is it difficult? Are you compiling a kernel, or I don't know, but everything looked like ready to go, like just ready-made for you, prepared for you to just install and dump on a disk. back when DOS was common, you would have to do the same thing. If you wanted to expand the storage on your system, you would do the same thing. If you popped in a raw device, you'd have to partition, and you just put how many partitions you wanted on there. Then you'd have to format the partitions and then mount those partitions. And that's the same in Linux. Not really. There's GUIs. I use GUIs. I don't think, except to, comment out a device. I haven't done an FS tab entry like in years. I just use GUI now. I don't know. There's still uses for it, of course. Like if you're going to SSH into a remote system and manage things that way, yeah, you kind of have to know what is on, how to manage an FS tab or something like that, or how to go in and work with different devices and kind of take a look at things and be able to actually use the system fully from just the command line. Of course, there are options on Linux, just like every other operating system, to go through and actually connect through a GUI interface to that system, but it's just really, that doesn't make much sense, especially if it's remote. It's way faster and maybe even more secure to do it just through a terminal interface, So I don't know. Anyway, let's go back to the command line a little bit, and you see the 2. If you're watching the video, you see the 2 and the 3 that's entered. I've got I'm using the Del Quiet key. Now this is actually running on the old system. This video is going to be in 1280 by 1024. That's going to be the oh my gosh, what am I trying to say here? Screen resolution, because the screen resolution on the system is running on a CRT. That is 1280 by 1024. And this CRT, I gotta say, I haven't played games on a CRT in a very long time, but it looks absolutely amazing. The colors and just the refresh rate is just crazy fast. I had forgotten how amazing it is to use a CRT. Okay, so anyway, what have we looked at? We looked at the CPU, we looked at the RAM, we looked at the storage, we looked at an individual file. So let's just do changing directories. Of course, it's going to be CD for change directory. So let's say we want to go to the root directory. We just use CD /. But let's go back home. So that's going to be CD /home /Matt, or whatever your username is. But let's talk about actually listing in that directory and taking a look and seeing what's in there. So you can use ls. That's going to list everything that's in there. But if you're wanting to kind of look through stuff and you're looking for something, then you should use, or you can, I won't say should use, but you can use L. And that's going to show you regular files, and then it's going to show you directories. And the directories are going to have a slash in front of them, so you know it's a directory. And if you want to see what's in each directory, you can do L space asterisk. Let's try that again. Where are we at here? There we go. And that's going to show you the directory name. Like for instance, I have Snap, and inside of Snap I have a directory called Brave. I have one called Cool Retro Term, and which looks really weird on an actual CRT. And then I've got OBS-Studio, and then I've got Urban Terror because I've installed that as a Snap. That's a really great game. And then I've got a directory called Steam, and inside of Steam I have a directory called Logs. So if you're wanting to just kind of look through some different, if you're looking for something and you don't want to change what directory you're actually working in, but you do want to look for something in another directory, you can use L and L asterisk, and that will show you what directories are in every directory that's in your current working directory, if that makes sense. So let's say I've got LMMS here as one directory, and then within there I've got another directory called projects. So I'm going to do L, and then I'm going to do LMMS / projects, and I'm going to see what's in. Can't access, no such file directory. Oh, I left the S off of there. Okay, so inside of LMMS projects, I've got opc.mmpz and opc.mmpz.back. So the intro music, I used LMMS to make that loop. And then, I didn't mention that. So actually, I didn't know if I was planning on mentioning this, but like everything for the everything for the podcast that I do is made with free software. with one exception of the Nathan Hale music that I featured. And again, thanks, Nathan. But I believe he actually made that on his, oh gosh, he told me it was like he actually produced all of that using GarageBand on a phone, which is amazing. So that's fantastic, Nathan. That is awesome. But it is Creative Commons, so you can use that freely for however you want to use that. But everything that's on the podcast is used. I've used free software to do that. It's either been recorded in Linux, like the band music, or just the electronic kind of music. I produced that on LMMS back in 2010, and then I did another one in 2011. But everything today I actually made on this system. I did the graphics, the old CRT. I made that in Inkscape, and then the background is a GIMP paintbrush, like the fill. It's like a fill pattern, and then the music was LMMS. So just thought I'd mention that. You can do all kinds of nifty stuff with free software. Now, I do have some training in graphic design. That was specifically training with what is that program called? It's called Photoshop. And oh gosh, the Inkscape, the other, like the Adobe Inkscape. I don't know what it's called. I've forgotten the names of those things. But anyway, back to the terminal. So, okay, so what have we looked at? We've looked at some of the hardware stuff. We've looked at kind of looking through directories, changing directories. Now, some of the more simple stuff is like making a directory. So let's go back to, I think I'm still in the home directory. Yes. So let's make a directory. That's going to be mkdir. Now, that's the same, I do believe, in DOS. And just like mkfs, like making a file system, it's going to be the same in DOS as well. So we're going to make a directory called 1. And I'm going to do ls *1*, and that's not, what am I, no, that's not how that works. I'm sorry. Let me clear the screen here. All right, so we made the directory 1, and I'm going to make another directory, mkdir /1/2. So I'm going to make a directory inside of 1, and I'm going to call it 2. All right. So now to remove a directory, you use the command rmdir, that's remove directory, and I'm going to try and remove the directory 1 that I just made. And it's going to give me an error. It's going to say that directory is not empty. So this is the case when you want to use the option rm, because if we go into the man page for remove directory, rmdir, it says remove empty directories. So that's removing directories if they're empty. So I'm going to exit this manual with Q. And so in this case, I have a directory that's not empty. And if I want to see what's in it, I can do L1. And I see that inside of 1 is 2. So let's do L1/2. And I see that there's nothing in there. So I've verified that there's nothing in that directory. I'm still in my home directory as my working directory. So let's say I just want to go ahead and remove both those directories. So then I'm going to do rm space rf1. Okay, so now let's do L1. Okay, cannot access 1, no such file or directory. So rm-rf is a good command for removing directories if you know for sure what the contents are. Now, this is not a very safe way to remove things. And I say that because when you do an rm space -rf, let's go into the manual for rm. What that's doing is F is forcing it, and R is recursive. So it removes directories and their contents recursively. So that means that it's going to remove every single thing that's in that directory, and it's going to force it. It's not going to, now you can also do interactive. So which would be -I, and it says prompt before every removal. So if you wanted to do rm -I, that would be a lot safer, because you would have to verify every single thing that you're deleting from that directory. And that's just a safer way to do it. However, if you wanted to, you could actually, I don't know, you could set up some kind of trash directory. that you want to specify on your own and set that. I don't know. There's I don't know. There's safer ways to do it than just rm-rf. There's a lot safer ways, but anywho, okay, so we've looked at making directories, removing directories. I'm just trying to think of some really simple basic stuff for the terminal for Linux. Man, there's a lot of stuff that's not simple that I really love doing in the terminal, but I don't want to go over that stuff. I'm trying to keep it simple for today. I'm going to go back to the camera. I'm trying to keep it simple for today because I really do want this to be kind of just an introduction to how I think of Linux, what Linux is to me. To me, Linux is always going to be the command line. I don't think of GUI when I think of Linux because I install everything through a terminal, and it's just the terminal. It's even like when I used to use DOS, I used a lot of the same programs in DOS that I use in Linux, like FTP. That was a big one for me. I've used a lot of FTP in my life, and just the different commands that you use for when you use FTP. I don't know. They're pretty much the same as an SFTP. Well, they are the same as an SFTP. Put, get. Actually, I think there's a different. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about that right now. I'm getting off track here. So I'm going to go back to the terminal here. Let's take a look at some handy things that are in the terminal that you can use. One would be the date. So it says Monday the 4th, November 2019, and it is 11:32 p.m. Getting late. There is a calendar. Okay, so you can look at your calendar and look at it that way. That's handy. Now, these things aren't just like visually handy. There are a lot of options for each one of these that are incredibly intricate and detailed, which is really great for if you're making bash scripts. If you're scripting something, especially for now, here's one thing. Like on the date, let's say that you have a file that's automated to be saved, or some kind of batch file that's automated to be saved. Well, you can choose how you want it to be named, and I've done this in the past, is pull parts of the date and maybe use a part of the time to create those individual files so that you know exactly when that file was generated. It's actually in the name. It'll say what it is, and then it'll actually attach the date to it. Just some things like that. Now, the calendar is kind of cool because if we go to man space cal, and I don't think I said those commands as I typed them. So the date is just date, the word date, and calendar is CAL. So we're going to go man space cal, and I think this is, where's it at? I think, is it -E? No, that's Easter. Oh, Julian. Okay, days 1 base, numbered from January 1st. Okay, so you can do a cal-J, and it says display Julian days 1 based, numbered from January 1st. So let's look at what day number today is. It's going to be cal-J, and it's going to be day 308. Today is day 308. So that's pretty nifty. All right. So, oh yeah, I wanted to talk about text editors as well. Now, I started with VIM, which is VI improved. I've never used VI, but I've only used VI improved. Now, the thing on Pop OS, if you type VI, or if you type VIM, it'll say, hey, I didn't find that. But if you type VI, it'll take you to Vim. It'll take you to VI improved. So that's kind of strange. My goodness, I'm trying to quit here. What am I doing? There we go. I'm sitting at a strange angle, so I can't exactly hit all the keys properly. But I've become a Nano user. Nano is just fantastic. I got introduced to Nano because of the Raspberry Pi and because of Raspbian. And, it's fantastic. I gotta say, I really like Nano. But, yeah, I don't know. I'm having trouble thinking of what I wanted to. I don't know. I guess that's good enough. That's a basic introduction, I guess. But the man pages, man, read the manual. RTM, a lot friendlier, but the manual really, really helps. If you're a newbie to Linux, you really don't have to be a newbie that long because there's manuals. And that's of course just for what comes on your system. But that's very, very helpful information, and it really does. It really does help a lot. Now, if you're not going to be in the terminal too much, it's been talked about over the years. Is it really necessary for there to be a terminal in Linux anymore? I don't know. You could probably have an operating system that's Linux based and still have all the GNU goodness in there, and not have a terminal. And probably some people will be just fine with that. And, I don't think that would be a problem for a lot of users. But for, I guess, long term, or people that have been using Linux for a very long time, or Unix or whatever, and they're moving over, then a terminal. I don't know. I don't know what I would do without a terminal. I don't think there's a day that I use a system that I don't use the terminal. And just for one thing or another, whether it's moving files from one system to another, or taking a like this show and making it into an audio file. There's just many different things that I actually use the terminal for. So anyway, I think that'll do it for the podcast today. I just wanted to do a video about the terminal and do it in this really awesome resolution, and have some retro look. I keep forgetting to go back to the camera, but just have this like this old looking kind of style video. I watched some of the very first webcam videos from like the late 90s, like 1999 and 2000, and they all kind of had this like terrible grainy look. And so I made the camera, I took the resolution of this webcam down as far as I could, and it kind of overdid it a little bit on some of the graphic settings in OBS to just make it look totally legit. And just having some fun. But anyway, hey, thank you for watching today, and thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and I think that'll do it. And I will see you next time.